Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Ask an Expert webinar. This is the third in our five-part series that we're running this fall. We have two more webinars coming up in early December on the 3rd and the 5th. You're welcome to check our website, Lake of the Woods Water Sustainability Foundation, to look for those two remaining webinars if you'd like to register for them. I'll post a link in the chat later too. My name is Tika Newton, and I'm the International Watershed Coordinator. I work for the Lake of the Woods Water Sustainability Foundation and the International Joint Commission, along with many other partners through the Rainy Lake of the Woods watershed. I'm joining you from my home in Kenora, Ontario, in Treaty 3 territory. So today you're going to hear from some partners who are doing some very cool work that's helping us to better understand the Rainy River. Before we get started, though, as always, I'm going to take you through a few brief housekeeping points. If you're new to the Ask an Expert webinar series, welcome. This is our opportunity for those of us who work on watershed issues to share our work with the wider world and for you all to ask us questions. So listen attentively today and be prepared to ask questions toward the end of the webinar. Please note that we are recording the session today, so it'll be rebroadcast on the Lake of the Woods Water Sustainability Foundation website. You can find this one and all of our previous Ask an Experts webinars on there already. If you're new to Zoom or you haven't used it for a while, I'll just give you a quick run through of how to use the website. On your computer, you can access the taskbar by scrolling to the bottom of the page. There you're going to see an option in the lower left corner to adjust your audio settings. You can mute and unmute, but only if I give you permission later in the webinar. You can also choose to use your computer speakers or a headset or earbuds using that audio feature. Everyone is muted as they've come in today because it's a webinar. If you're using the mobile app, you can access Zoom controls by tapping anywhere on the active screen on your phone. A taskbar should pop up at the bottom of the screen, and then you can quickly mute or unmute or shut off your video by swiping right, and you can restore the sound and the video by swiping left. If you have a question, you can type it into the chat window, or you can use the Q&A feature, the button down at the bottom menu bar. You can also use the reactions button to raise your hand. That's also found in the bottom menu. But we'll let the speakers finish their presentations first before we try to address any of your questions. You can access the chat window through that bottom menu. And remember, you can type your questions or comments into the chat at any time. Remember that everyone is going to see what you type in the chat unless you direct it toward a specific person. But even then, the hosts will see everything that gets put in the chat, whether it's a two-way a private conversation with somebody else or not. So just bear that in mind. And now let's get on to this webinar. So today I'm joined by four presenters. We have Zach Morris, a professional engineer and coastal department manager for AMI Consulting Engineers, which is a firm based in Superior, Wisconsin. Although today, Zach and Jordan are joining us from the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Zach has extensive experience in designing waterfront structures and stabilizing shorelines. He has a deep understanding of coastal designs, given his hands-on construction experience and design expertise. He frequently performs and oversees scientific studies such as wave and sediment transportation analyses, seafloor mapping, and underwater inspections. In the current project that we'll be talking about today, Zach was the project manager. He was involved in equipment selection, project design and execution, connecting the project partners, including the International Joint Commission, and providing quality assurance and quality control on the final report. In his spare time, Zach enjoys hiking in the mountains and exploring the boundary waters with his wife and four kiddos. And two fun facts about Zach, he developed an interest in engineering from his roots as an automotive mechanic, and apparently he has a knack for noticing haircuts. Jordan Vargas is an environmental specialist, also with AMI Consulting Engineers. In the current project, Jordan served as the field lead and support. He determined the best way for surveying the various water conditions, whether that was in high water, low water, through vegetation, turbulent flow, and so on. He conducted quality assurance and quality control on data and prepared the final report. Dr. Marianne Bachand is the project coordinator for the hydrodynamic and ecohydraulic section of the National Hydrologic Services at Environment and Climate Change Canada. That is quite a mouthful. She earned her PhD in plant biology from the Université Laval in 2013, where she studied the resilience of boreal forests to deer overpopulation. After completing her PhD, she transitioned to ecohydraulic modeling during her postdoctoral work at ECCC. Since then, Dr. Bachand has developed numerous habitat models, including a wetland model that was used to evaluate the 2000 rule curves of the Rainy Lake and Namakan Reservoir system. Since 2016, she has expanded her efforts to create habitat and wetland models for various transboundary water bodies, including the Lake Champlain-Richelieu River Basin, St. Mary's River, the St. Lawrence River, and Lake Ontario. These models are instrumental in managing water levels, assessing the impacts of climate change, and evaluating flood mitigation strategies. In 2023, she returned to the Rainy region to enhance the models that were used to develop the rule curve study. Olivier Champeau has a master's degree in fluvial geomorphology from the Université de Montréal, and he has dedicated his career to river and lake modeling at Environment and Climate Change Canada since 2000. Olivier's experience has led to contributions to several major projects with the International Joint Commission, notably on the St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario, Lake Champlain, and the Richelieu River, the St. Mary's River Rapids, and the Rainy and Namakan Lakes and Rainy River. Olivier now focuses on coordinating modeling efforts to enable the next generation of modelers and scientists to participate in various projects aimed at finding new solutions to today's challenges. So welcome to all four of you. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm going to turn it over to Zach and Jordan in just a minute to share work that they did with us this year to map the bottom of the Rainy River. And then Marianne and Olivier will follow them and tell us how they plan to use the data that Zach and Jordan collected. But first, I'm going to give you a bit of a background, a debrief on why these projects were done in the first place. So to set the scene, back in 2015, the IJC, the International Joint Commission, undertook a study to review the operation and impacts of the 2000 rule curves that are used to manage the water levels and flows in Namakan and Rainy Lakes. So if you don't really understand what rule curves are, don't worry about that. We've got a whole webinar dedicated to that coming up on December 3rd. I encourage you to register for it. One of the outcomes of the study in 2015 was a recommendation to use adaptive management to monitor and understand how changes to these rule curves may affect Namakan Reservoir, Rainy Lake, and Rainy River. Then in 2020, the IJC established the Adaptive Management Committee, which is one of the 4 committees of the International Rainy Lake of the Woods Watershed Board. The AMC considers information that's collected by resource agencies and others that might indicate how the 2018 rule curves affect water levels and flows and other interests in the boundary waters of the Rainy River Basin. So I was the inaugural Canadian co-chair of the Adaptive Management Committee, and I'm now its secretary. So we've been working on this stuff alongside Marianne, Olivier, Zach, and Jordan for a while. The AMC assesses how the system may be changing over time and whether any modifications to the rule curves may be needed. To do this, to be able to make those assessments, we need to use watershed models to experimentally test the outcomes of different operating decisions. Marianne and Olivier are going to give you a much better overview of how the models are constructed and function, but I'll give you the extremely pared down version right now, just so you can understand why Zach, Jordan, and their colleagues had to spend July in a boat on Rainy River in the name of science. So watershed models are built in layers. At the base of the model, we have a digital elevation model. Basically, this is the structural blueprint for the shape of the water body. The DEM describes the depth, width, and height of the basin, and it tells us where water meets the shore and how shorelines change as water depth changes. On top of the DEM, we then add other model layers, such as the effects of wind and waves or ecosystem information, like where we find submerged or emergent plants, shrubs, trees, where fish spawn, and that sort of thing. In our watershed, as I just mentioned, some of these models had been developed through the 2015 rule curve study, but at that time, we were only able to complete a digital elevation model for Namakan Lake and Rainy Lake. And then for Rainy River, we only got half of the DEM completed, so just for the upper portion of the river from Rainy Lake to Manitou Rapids. Below that, we didn't have enough information about the shape, depth, and profile of the bottom of the river to be able to construct a full digital elevation model. And so the model for that section, that lower section of the Rainy River, has always been built on interpolated theoretical data. So this year, we were able to secure some funding through the International Joint Commission's International Watersheds Initiative program to be able to go out in the field and collect the missing bathymetry information for that section of the lower Rainy River. Zach and Jordan and their colleagues were conscripted to go out in the field in July, and they're going to tell us about that work, which had many challenges, but also delivered some amazing results. And then we're going to hear from Marianne and Olivier about how they're putting that information that was gathered by Zach and his team to work in the new models in order to help us to assess the effects of water level management on aquatic vegetation, benthos, northern pike, walleye, and all kinds of other indicators. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will hand it over to Zach and Jordan to present the work that they did in the field.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you, Tika. All right, here we go. Should be operational now. So yes, thank you for the opportunity to present. Looking forward to any questions that y'all might have. So don't hold back when we get to the end here. And with that, you know, it was a wonderful adventure getting up there, spending over a month on the river doing high resolution bathymetric surveying. So we look forward to kind of explaining to you overall how that went, you know, what challenges presented, how we overcame those, and what kind of unique opportunities existed as well. As some of you are aware, the water levels are quite high in the Rainy River this year for an extended period of time. So that posed challenges and opportunities at the same point. So I look forward to chatting about that a little bit more. But I'll just let Jordan take it over from here. So
perfect. Well, let's jump right into it here. So we'll jump right in. So very first question is, what is exactly is a bathymetric survey? A bathymetric survey, also known as a hydrographic survey, is a water-based survey, much like you would go out and do a topographic survey of land. What we aim to do here is we aim to get an understanding of what the bottom of a river or a lake looks like. And so in this case, we were doing a bathymetric survey, also known as a multi-beam survey, which we'll get into a little bit more depth here in a little bit. But bathymetric surveys, they can provide a lot of different information that can help in a whole lot of different sort of situations. Couple like floodplain impact assessments. We can go out, we can measure the water depths of a river, and we can then take that data back into a computer and we can assess it, and we can look at how adding a new structure to a water body can actually affect a floodplain or not affect a floodplain. We use a lot of bathymetric survey and project developments in understanding what the bottom of a lake or bottom of a river looks like prior to designing structures. Again, it's important information to have when you're going through these type of designs. We can look at environmental impacts. We can find different types of habitat that you can't see from the surface, and anything of environmental concern prior to the project starting. Erosion studies, bathymetric surveys are huge in that. We can actually go out and see scour holes. We often see it a lot in harbors where boats and barges dock. When they spin up their props to test their motors, they often create a big scour hole beneath them. And so those are things that we can go ahead and we can kind of see. We can also see buildup of sediments, as you can kind of see in that bottom right picture. That's actually an image from a dredge survey that we've done not too long ago. It kind of shows your high spots, an area of sediments that sediment needs to be removed. And then it's also used for archaeological studies. Different types of bathymetric survey can help you locate sunken ships, planes, or any other structures of historical significance. So there's a lot of different things you can do with bathymetric surveys. So there are also, like we were talking about, there's different types of bathymetric surveys or hydrographic surveys. The very first one and the most primitive one that's been probably around the longest is a simple lead line survey. It's exactly what it looks like on the right-hand side there. It's just a tape measure with a weight on it. And what people would do is they'd go out on a boat, they stop at a point, they would mark their location, however they were going about doing that, and then they would drop a weight and measure the depth. And then they would write that down, and then they would move 10, 15, 20, however accurate they were trying to be, and they'd do that again, and they would just over and over again, just kind of measure their water depths. And that's how a lot of the first hydrographic surveys were done. Just you know, paddling along, motoring along and measuring your depths and moving along. So not highly accurate, but accurate enough to get you a general idea of what's going on. The next kind of step in hydrographic survey or bathymetric survey is known as the single beam survey. So this is a survey that we still use quite a bit to this day. It's exactly as it sounds. It is a hydrographic survey or bathymetric survey that sends out one single beam of sound waves from an acoustical head down to the lake bottom that then bounces off the lake or river bottom and comes back up, and then it registers the depth. Again, exactly, it's a single beam, usually typically 9 inches wide. So you're still not as accurate as some of the more up-to-date information or equipment that we use today, but still a lot more accurate than a lead line survey.
Yep, and we'll have an illustration of this too.
Yep.
In a little bit. Yep.
And then the next step, and this is what we used on the Rainy River, is a multi-beam survey. So it's exactly the same kind of technology, or not technology, concept of a single beam, except you're setting out one single beam, you're sending out multiple acoustic soundings to the lake bottom and reading and coming back. So you're collecting a lot more data, a lot more information, and you're also covering a lot more area with a multi-beam survey compared to a single beam survey. Kind of like I said, a single beam survey usually covers 9 inches of ground, where a multi-beam survey can cover anywhere from 10 to 40 to 50 feet wide swath, depending on your water depth and kind of what you're running. Next, kind of getting out of those first 3 surveys were more topographic surveys. Now we're kind of getting into side scan surveying, or actually imaging of the bottom. Side scan imagery is a really cool piece of technology because it is a way to get a picture of what the lake bottom or river bottom actually looks like, and kind of get an idea of actually what's sitting down there in a pretty clear view. You can kind of see on that right-hand side, this was done on the upstream side of a dam, and you can kind of see the location. You can see there's ripraps, you can kind of see the pits and valleys, you can see the structure of the wall there. And so it's a really cool piece of technology, hydrographic survey technology, that you can use to get a real cool, clear image of what's going on beneath the surface of the water. Next piece of technology is called a sector scan survey. It's much like a side scan survey, except for when you're looking straight down on, you're kind of getting a side view. So you can kind of see in this image here on the right, you kind of have your apron or your concrete wall there on the left, if you were standing on the river bottom looking straight forward, and you can kind of see the river bottom there, and you can see the water line up on top. Again, it's a really cool piece of technology where you can get some good imagery of different structures under the water. Then we have sub-bottom profiling. A lot different than any other piece of technology we've talked about here. This is actually used to penetrate sediment and give you an idea of what lies below the surface of a lake bottom. So you can kind of see in this imagery that dark line up towards the top is actually your lake bed or your river bed. So that's your top layer, and above that is water. Then below that is different layers of sediment. You can kind of pick up that second line where we had a sediment characteristic change. So if the sediment became more dense or returned a different kind of sound profile back, letting us know that there is a different sediment profile there. So again, really cool piece of information or technology. And last but not least is a magnetometer survey. So this is often used in historic or archaeological surveys. What this is doing it's picking up ferrous objects below the water level. So it's scanning across the bottom, it's picking up magnetic anomalies and letting us know if there's something magnetic there. So you can kind of see we have a couple hot spots that have popped up red, letting us know there's something there that needs a little bit more information. And with magnetometer surveys, you're often running these surveys at the same time as you would run a side scan survey, a multi-beam survey, to collect as much data as you possibly can on those. So the biggest question that we always get when we start talking about multi-beam surveys or any types of hydrographic surveys is, my fish finder can do that as well. And so we wanted to kind of take a few minutes to kind of discuss the difference between a fish finder and a multi-beam survey piece of equipment. One of the biggest difference is between these two technologies is the frequency at which they operate at. And so your typical fish finder operates at 200 kilohertz. And so what that actually means is just the quality or image you can get when you're doing your survey. Typically, the higher the frequency, the greater image you can get. So like I said, fish finders often run around 200 kilohertz, where multi-beam equipment can run up to 750 kilohertz. We typically survey at 450 kilohertz. The reason being 750 kilohertz is that's a lot of detail for a multi-beam survey. So it kind of really shrinks down the swath of your beam, takes a little bit longer, takes a lot more power. So typically when we're running 450 kilohertz for our frequency. The next thing is the detail between the two. So each of these systems run on a ping rate. What a ping rate is basically how many pictures can your equipment take in a second. So your average fish finder is taking 2.5 pings per second. So for every second, it's taking 2.5 pictures of the lake bottom, where our multi-beam can actually take 60 pictures per second as it's going along. So as we're kind of talking about, the multi-beam can collect a lot more data and get you a much prettier picture at the end. And we'll show some pictures of kind of our raw data that we first collected to kind of give you a better idea of what that kind of looks like. The next big thing with these between these two systems is the overall accuracy of each system. So typically with the fish finder, depending on your conditions, and believe it or not, you can calibrate your fish finders. You're usually getting an accuracy of 6 inches or to multiple feet, again, depending on how they're calibrated and what kind of conditions you're in. Now with our multi-beam systems, in the right conditions and running RTX, which is a satellite correction system that actually corrects our data as it's being collected, we can get a vertical accuracy of 1 centimeter and a horizontal accuracy of 1.5 centimeters. Again, this is highly accurate, but it is something we can attain with the right proper conditions and calibrations and all that fun stuff. And then I think the biggest cost or the biggest difference between the two is just the cost. You can spend hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars for a fish finder, whereas a multi-beam system, you're up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think that's one of the biggest difference between the two things. And then also the amount of knowledge it takes to run one of these multi-beam systems. They're not just a plug and play system. It actually takes a lot of time and effort to learn one of these systems. And our surveyors have done a fantastic job of learning how this system works, how it ticks, and kind of every once in a while it's quirks and how it operates. So
Yeah, well, thanks, Jordan, for that. I'll take a quick stab now. So a lot of information you just gave you, a lot of different survey technologies. So yeah, I look forward to questions again at the end. But overall scope of work I'll go into this a little bit. It was roughly 48 miles of survey, river survey, or 77 kilometers. It includes the Long Sioux Rapids section, which was a very challenging section for a lot of reasons. And we originally proposed to do that as a single beam survey, but with the higher water levels, we were able to obtain that with multi-beam survey. It pushed the limits of our equipment.
yes,
We had to do a few different things, roll up the sleeves and figure it out, but ultimately it resulted in higher resolution data. Your multi-beam data is inherently a lot more accurate than single beam data. So that was a good endeavor. Short coverage, normally for multi-beam, we're 5 feet of water and deeper, just because it's, like Jordan said, it's a very expensive piece of equipment, so you don't want to run that aground. And then when we're doing the multi-beam survey, our beams span sideways about 120 degrees from center, so 60 degrees each way. And that's able to get us into about 3 feet of water depth when we're actually getting close to that shoreline there. So given that the water level is high, we have LiDAR coverage from the state of Minnesota. We actually have a pretty well comprehensive data set for the entire Rainy River now, both terrestrial and aquatic, which is phenomenal. And yeah, right now we're in the process of cleaning and sorting that data. We collected it all, and I'd almost say the harder part is sorting it. Now you have to clean it all out and filter it, and it takes a lot of time. Roughly, it's a 2-to-1 ratio. So if you're in the field for a day, you expect 2 days of post-processing time. So we still have a ways to go there. Overall, Tika did a wonderful job explaining, you know, the need for this project. I don't need to go into too much more detail on that, but there's a lot of needs here. And this is not an exhaustive list. I mean, there's so many benefits of having a higher resolution data set. Once we got above Long Sioux Rapids, we realized we're kind of in no man's territory. We know people have been up there, but there wasn't really any good publicly available data. So we were pretty cautious, and there's a lot of value in getting all this high resolution data for the rule occurs and aquatic habitats, reptiles, and so forth. So overall shot here between 4 Mile Bay, which is in the top northwest corner of this image, to Manitou Rapids. That's where we started off, is at the lower Manitou Rapids, south of the actual rapids. And we'll show some images of that, what that looks like. Long Sioux is just downdrift of that, about 7 miles. So you can see that on the screen here too. We'll focus on that for a little while. And just to recap kind of what Jordan was saying too, this is the equipment that we did use. It was a R2 Sonic multi-beam echo sounder. It's mounted on the starboard side of the vessel, 120-degree swath angle. Transmits a lot of individual pulses. So our beam sends out basically 256 different shots going down versus traditionally like your fish finder will do one, or your depth finder will do one. Fish finder does a little more comprehensive. So there's very high resolution data there going down. The other thing that we have is a pitch, roll, heading, and heave sensor. So basically, if your boat goes this way, up or down, it corrects for all that stuff dynamically. So it's incredibly accurate from that lens. And you can see a couple of shots down there on the bottom left corner of the survey vessel we use for the Rainy River. And then also the passenger, we can call it, but the person operating the system while the other person pilots the boat. That person has 3 screens up at all time, and it's a very interactive process. It's not just hit go and put it down. You're constantly playing on those screens and adjusting things. And then, yeah, some supporting devices is the Trimble equipment as well as the AML3. It's a solid velocity profiler. Basically, at every single confluence of a river or change in depth or this or that, you get the different water temperatures. And if you don't account for the correction in that, your accuracy goes down significantly. So we had what they call a cast, throw out the sound velocity profiler multiple times every single day to make sure we're getting the right data and the right temperatures for the survey conditions. This is also probably Jordan's favorite graphic, showing the lead line and the single beam and then the multi-beam survey. From like a land survey side, I think of like lead line and single beam as like your topographic. You're out there with the rod, you're taking shots, especially with the lead line. I think that's pretty much comparable to a topographic survey. And then multi-beam would be like your LiDAR survey, where you're flying a drone or an airplane's flying over with LiDAR to give coverage of a large area. That'd be similar to multi-beam here. So yeah, every single day we start up, take some shots on our control point, check in, adjust the water line elevation, make sure that all of our instrumentation's working right. We do all types of patch testing, as they call it, to make sure that everything's checking in from the tilt and the forward and velocity, and gets pretty intense. So we do that every single morning, make sure everything's checking in well. And with that, we'll jump into some challenges and opportunities that we saw in this project. Jordan, you want to take this?
Sure. Yeah, so as we were kind of talking about, a lot of the Rainy River, when we were first originally looking at it, there's not a whole lot of information on the conditions of the water, or the river, I should say, where the vegetations are, where can we access. When we originally started looking at this, we were even unsure if we could even get up past the Manitou Rapids in there with our boat. So a lot of on the fly thinking and adapting as we got out there. Like I said, we were talking about high water levels for this. Our original plan was actually to start out by 4 Mile Bay and then work our way back. We figured let's start off easy, kind of get our feet underneath us, get to the rainy, get used to the rainy, and then we'll hit the hard part at the end. And then we kind of got out there, we did our scoping trip, and it's like, water's super high. We can probably get our main survey vessel up past the rapids and in there and do that. So we kind of, one of those things, we kind of totally flipped our project on its head. It's like, we'll start in the rainy, we'll start with the hard, or up on the Manitou Rapids. We'll start with the hard part and then we'll transition to the easy part.
Yeah, so this is Long Sioux right here, right?
Yep, this is Long Sioux, yeah. So you can kind of see those rapids, and typically, from what we're reading, you cannot get many boats up through there. We've seen pictures of flat bottoms kind of going through there, their motors up, kind of pushing and dragging over the rocks. But like we'll see in a future slide, water was extremely high by the time we got out there in early July. Yeah, so like you said, we were right around 14 feet when we got out there in water height or depth. And so that allowed us to get into those tighter sections and use multi-beam equipment to actually survey those areas where we're typically thinking we might have to single beam, or even in some areas use topographic survey equipment or R10 and just walk around and take shots. So this year with the higher than expected water levels actually helped us a lot in collecting greater data. And then again, with the rainy, some of the things that we were running into is there's a lot of hazards in that river, from rocks to logs to all sorts of different things. And so that added quite a few, some extra challenges to it, and made sure our boat captain at the time was paying attention and weaving in and out of logs and all this other sort of stuff. So yeah, this is kind of what we were talking about here with the river gauge. You can kind of see on that far left graph there that that 14 feet is where we started when we started on July 8th. And then you can kind of see where we ended right around August 16th. So you can see how much it dropped. It went from 14 feet down to 6.5 feet in a matter of a month and a half. And then I looked it up today actually, and now the river is at 3.85 feet. And so it's dropped significantly since we've last been out, since we've been out there. Then on the right-hand side, you can kind of see the fluctuation. I believe that's about a year. So you can kind of really see that fluctuation in the river over time. So yeah, for most of the river there, we were kind of dealing with river conditions from 1 to 2 knots, which is just fine for multi-beam surveying. You're not getting too much turbulence around your survey head. And it's easy driving for the boat operator. It just needs to make sure they're not hitting any debris. With the Long Sioux Rapids, it was a much different story. We were hitting with the rapids through there. Even though the water was high, we were still hitting areas of 6 to 7 knots in places, and very turbulent water. And where that turbulent water becomes a concern is you start getting water flow going over the head of that sonar head that's in the water. And what that does is it starts creating what we call backscatter in the data. So the sonar head starts picking up irrelevant data that's not correct and not pertaining to the riverbed. It's not so much getting confused, but it's just picking up data that's just not there. And the other big thing is typically when we survey in slower water, we run down the river and then we run back up the river. In the rainy, or up in the Long Sioux Rapids part, we were only able to run down the river. Because if we ran up the river, basically the sonar head was just making this big geyser that was just filling the boat with water. And so it's like, that's not going to work at all. So we were in the rapids, we were running the equipment basically at its limits. We did have to switch out some bolts and some hardware that were getting worn out. from. So any faster, we would not have been able to survey in that area. And then our boat operators also got good at crab walking the boat down that section of the river, because again, basically for that, the motor wasn't in drive, or wasn't any throttle, you just kind of had it in drive, and you're just kind of hoping you could steer your keep yourself straight in a line going down. So and then once we started getting towards more 4 Mile Bay there, we started running into more issues with vegetation. So the multi-beam head that we use cannot survey in vegetation. And the main reason being is when it's setting those sound velocities down to the riverbed, it actually hits that vegetation and starts sending back false information. So you just, as soon as you start getting into that thick vegetation, the person that's operating the multi-beam at the time just starts seeing all these wacky values that just don't make any sense. So heavy vegetation, we just weren't able to survey in. Again, we really didn't run into it till we got closer to 4 Mile Bay. We got a few images here next. You can kind of really see those thick vegetation mats as we get into it. But yeah, and then we're also, again, as we're talking about, we were running into quite a few, a lot of woody debris left over from past historic logging operations in the area. But again, yep, so here's, we were able to fly our drone while we were out there, get some good photos of this vegetation mats that were kind of in the area. That whole area of vegetation, we just weren't able to survey. We got back into that area a little bit in the open water and grabbed some data, and then again, yep, again, you can kind of see those vegetation mats there alongside the river.
And those are all natural, right?
Those are all, as far as we know, yeah, we're looking back at historic photos. They seem to pop up every year, so. And again, kind of talking about, we were, as we were surveying down the river, we started picking up some different anomalies that we're trying to figure out, some rock structures, some crib structures. And so we kind of dived into the history of the area and found out that this area has a rich history of logging. And so that kind of explains some of the structures, especially the rock crib structures that we were starting to pick up the closer we got to 4 Mile Bay, explained why we were seeing so many what we call deadheads in the water, which is a log that just, the front of it's just kind of barely floating above the water. So it's hard to see. And so, yeah, so it was very interesting as we were surveying, we were seeing these things like, oh, let's start doing our research into the history of the area.
Yeah, and big shout out to the County Highway Department and Soil and Water Conservation District for sending us some information on this, so we didn't wreck our boat. So thank you.
Yeah, so this is one of those things we were talking about, those submerged rock piles that we were starting to pick up and see, and we were looking at the data, and it was really cool how fast these would just kind of come up and then they just disappear. And doing some additional research, we found out these were rock piles that were placed in the river back in the day to kind of help break up ice flows, to help keep logs moving down the Rainy River as they're being processed. And then, so yeah, field work. And so we were done on August 16th, 2024. So we got a couple of images here coming up that kind of shows that raw data and really shows the quality that a multi-beam data can give, just on what the bottom looks like. So again, this data here collected, this is raw data that has not been processed. So you can kind of see up by the Manitou Rapids there, that purple section, that's a real deep scour hole right there. As the rapids come over that little bit of a ledge, kind of scours out. And for perspective, on average water elevation, or the edge of water there, was 330 meters. And so you can kind of see in that purple area, we were about 316.80 meters there. So it kind of gives you an idea of how deep it is right there, and then it really shallows out. But again, you can kind of see this is our raw data. So that's kind of why you're seeing there's little gaps in data, or little black spots. That's the fun part of going back through now and doing this post-processing, is kind of cleaning up that data to get a cleaner image. So again, this was Long Sioux Rapids. Again, you can kind of see, a little bit more rougher data, a little bit more cleaning to do in this area, but you can still see the really beautiful picture that we were able to get. And kind of see, you can start picking up on where we get some more deeper scours and where we kind of get some shallowing. of these sections of the river. And this is probably one of my favorite images, most favorite image from what we've collected so far. You can see this was a pretty long straight with average, with deeper waters, I should say. So kind of comparing this data to the last data, you can kind of see a lot less to clean up here, but you can really see the variations of the lake bed.
Yeah. So I know our folks at ECCC will be covering the deliverables and so forth, showing the cleaned up data. So the above shot is, before, and then the below shot's the cleaned up. So you can see all those little black spots are gone. It looks nice and pretty. And that's highly accurate data. So I don't need to go into too much to this because I want to leave some time for our friends there. But the sorting of the data, we're doing a 1 meter sorting, and that's what it looks like when you go across Rainy River. It's roughly 250 to 300 meters wide. So there's a lot of points even at a 1 meter grid. And with that, we'll just share some photos of the adventures that our guys had out there, catching fish, drinking energy drinks, day in the life, working on computers at night. So thank you.
Thanks, you guys. That was great. I'm going to hand it over to Marianne and Olivier to talk about what happens with all this data and how it gets incorporated into the models. For those who are viewing, I know the webinars typically are an hour long. This one's going to run a little bit long, I think. So feel free to stick around. If you can't stay past the top of the hour, if you have questions, just put them in the chat or the Q&A and we will answer them. And then you can come back and watch the recording on our website a little later this week. I'll try to get it up there tomorrow. Okay, go ahead, you guys.
Yep, thank you, Tika. It's great to be back working on the Rainy River. We've been working on the river 8 to 10 years ago now, so bring back the memories of the work we've done and the future work to be done with the new bathymetry data sets that Zach and Jordan show. So what we're doing here in Quebec City is mostly the integrated modeling. So we're gathering all the available data we could find on the river. So you will see today that we will present the upper river integrated modeling, since we didn't have at the time the bathymetry data as we have right now. So as you see, we can process and gather many data from pretty raw field data to a bunch of computed data based on those data. So like water depth, the slope of the river, velocities, and other kind of data set that we will present today. We developed a model to interact with fish habitat, plants habitat, and those variables that we call the RERM at the time. And now we're shifting to a more refined model that we will talk later. And this model were used to compute or assess the rule curve at the time on the Rainy River. So the main source of data for the integrated modeling is obviously the DEM. So at the time, we had the upper part of the river, so from the outlet of the Rainy Lake up to down to Manitou Rapids, and we have several data sets that we use to create our full DEM. We can now add the Zach and Jordan data sets that will be available soon. We have something for the lower river, so from Manitou Rapids to the Lake of the Woods, but it's mostly fishing maps where we kind of extracted bathymetry and converted to a DEM with a lot of arts and a little bit of scientific work, but it's something that we have. But as the value and the result that we have in integrated modeling is based on the quality of the data, that especially the bathymetric data. So we're not super comfortable with the results of the lower river, but for the upper part, it's better. So we will redo all the work for the lower river, and we will have hopefully great results to show. So just a few two images of the lower river. So from the old data set, old fishing maps that we try to extract something from the data set. On the on the left side of the screen, up the upper part, you have the what you can have with the fishing maps, and what you have down lower left corner is the one of sample Zach sent me. So you see on the right side the differences in the resolution. It's day and night. So we'll have a very good data set to work with. So this is the just an image of the complete DEM. So we have the LiDAR on each side of the river combined with the bathymetry data set that we use in all our models. From the raw DEM that we have, we can process several variables that can be used in fish habitat model, like the bottom slope of the river, that we can process with that, and we can have another variable that we call bottom curvature. So it's all data that we can derive or calculated from the DEM. We also have what we call the bottom friction, or what it's mostly like the substrate. We use every data set that we can find that have the substrate. We can use satellite imagery where we can identify substrate on the image. The new data sets from Zach and Jordan, we can see the substrate by the forms on the river. The image that Jordan showed earlier, we can definitely saw that it was it is sand dunes. So we can use that as an information to include that in the bottom friction. And the bottom friction is important for the fish habitat, but for the hydrodynamic model that we use to compute all the hydraulic variables that we produce. So to produce all the hydraulics variables, we need to gather and to have a database of all the flows and discharge, historic discharge that we can find from the different agencies that produce the flow. We have to make a clean database where there's no gaps, or to see if the quality of the data is suitable for what we have to do for fish habitat. So this is the main flows that we use. We have two major tributaries, like the Little Fork River and the Big Fork River, and we have the outflow of the lake, and we also have the discharge measure at Manitou Rapids. We also have one of the important part of the integrated modeling is the hydrodynamic modeling that we are doing here. So we are using 2D mesh to compute all the hydraulics. So for every node on the mesh, we have the elevation of the bed, we have the friction, and on that we can specify discharge or flows or levels that we need to have the results of all the 2D fields covering the mesh. So we have the velocities, the water depth, the levels along the river, and other post-processed hydraulic variables that we can use in the fish habitat model. Like here, you have two images of the water depth at International Falls. One it's a medium discharge, and the other one is on the high side discharge. But we can have also the water velocities. You have three images: one a low, one medium, and one high flow velocities at International Falls as well. So you can see the difference in the pattern. And we have a set of like 250 scenarios. So different combination of flows, and from the tributaries, like Little Fork, Big Fork, and for the outlet of the Ring Lake. And from that, we can use not only the raw DEM, but also a combination of the DEM and the hydraulic modeling, the model result to create new variables like the bottom slope in the flow direction. So this may be used like for fish habitat, like to identify a special local habitat for fish.
Oh,
yeah, I think it's yours, Mr. Bart.
Thank you, Olivier. So I hope with what Olivier presented, you understand that the integrated ecosystem response model is as good as the bathymetric survey is good. Because if we have a big error on the estimation of the elevation, we get big error on the digital elevation model, you're going to get error on your bottom slope, your hydrodynamic model, and at the end, at your suitable habitat model. So during the 2000 roll curve study, we developed several habitat models for the Rainy River, but also for Rainy Lake and Namakan Reservoir. I don't have the time to present you the 15 model developed during that study, so I decided to present to you how we use all the physics produced in the RERM to develop a spawning suitable habitat for lake sturgeon. And that model was used to evaluate the impact of the 2000 roll curve and was used to design the new 2018 roll curve. So we use a historical time series of air temperature to calculate the period when water level variation is critical for lake sturgeon during spawning and larval drift. So we use air temperature, and we develop an equation between air and water temperature to be able to calculate from 1950 to 2015 when the spawning period for lake sturgeon is initiated. We also use data coming from a master's student at the time, Adrienne Smith. She was directed by Dr. Michael Power and by Dr. Karen, I'm sorry if I mispronounce it, Smokorovsky or something like that, from DFO. So they did survey lake sturgeon egg in 2012 and 2013. And we were able to get those data. So at every site, I was able to know in 2012 or 2013 if they have observed or not lake sturgeon eggs. And from the integrated ecosystem response model, I was able to retro-calculate the physical variable that occur when they did those observations. So we were able to statistical relationship to link the physical variable, so bottom slope, water depth at the time, bottom slope in the sense of current, and so on. And we developed a statistical relationship between the physics and the presence of lake sturgeon egg. And we applied then those equations from 1950 to 2015 to evaluate different potential roll curve. The model that was selected at the time, I will not go through all the statistical numbers, but it established that lake sturgeon spawns in steep convex bottom slope in a negative slope in the flow direction. So that means that it makes sense because lake sturgeon kind of hide in big boulder when the current is passing through those boulders, so you get kind of a protection from the high speed of water. It's like a water velocity around 0.30 meter per second, and it was found in water depth between 0.50 and 7.40 meters. Here you have a map where you can compare the observation made on the field and the prediction of the model for 2012 and 2013. So in the black dot are where the people observe lake sturgeon egg, and the white dot is where they didn't find it, and the green dot it's where the model is predicting where the habitat is suitable for lake sturgeon. So it's normal that you see more green dots than actual observation, because there's a lot of other factor than just physical variable that can explain that you're finding eggs or not. You can think about predation, for example. So we have an accuracy of this model around 89%. So we were really happy about those results. So using the historical time series of water level and discharge at international falls, we calculate the surface area available for the spawning of Lake Sturgeon with what we call the historical time series or measured time series. So from 1950 to 2015. The red line here, it's when they decide to apply the 1970 roll curve, and the blue line, it's when they start to use the 2000 roll curve. So there's not a lot of difference between the different moments when they apply the roll curve when we look at the measured time series. We can try to focus on the year where we have more surface available for Lake Sturgeon spawning and go see what the discharge looked like at those specific years. So here you have 4 years. And you have the period when the spawning was established with the water temperature. And we can see that during those time, for those years at the spawning period, the discharge was kind of high, around 1,000 cubic meter per second. And we can then do the same exercise, but looking at years when we have a lower surface area available for the Lake Sturgeon spawning. So for those years, you can see that we see a low, but also a variable discharge during the spawning period. So Lake Sturgeon will have more habitat available for spawning if you get high discharge, around 1,000 cubic meter per second, and when this discharge is kind of stable during the spawning season. So here I'm showing you.
I think Patrick has his hand raised. I know he has to jump off here, so sorry for interrupting.
Of course, I don't see questions.
Okay, yeah, I have a hand raised, so let me see if I can allow him the quick chat, and I apologize for interrupting.
Yes, no, it's okay. Thank you.
All right, Patrick, looking for you. All right, go ahead, Patrick. You were on, but we can't hear you.
Maybe.
There we go. Yep, gotcha.
If you could just read my question, otherwise, if you can't hear me, or
No, we got
I'll
you.
put that in the chat. Oh, super. I was just curious if this data was going to be posted on the IJC site or another venue, and then if any data was collected upstream of the dam as part of this effort. Just bathymetric data.
Yeah, it was what I was thinking. So I will let Zach answer that question.
Yeah, so there's no bathymetric data collected upstream of the dam. Basically from Manitou Rapids and down is where we collected data. But my understanding is that there is a pretty comprehensive data set upstream of Manitou Rapids, so this ties it all in together. So that should be really good data for everyone to have. As far as availability, Marianne, I think that the ECCC has that digital elevation model eventually that you can look at on the website or the IERA.
It's not on any website, but we can share it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But it's not as the same resolution that you have right now. So it's
No,
less.
but you mean upstream.
Upstream,
So from
yeah.
international falls
Yeah.
to Manitou.
Okay.
It's not multi-beam bathymetry. That's what I mean.
Okay, yeah, as far as releasing from the IJC, I can ask that question to Patrick to see about, below Manitou Rapids to see how they plan to release that data. That's not up to me ultimately, but I can ask the question.
Sure. No, that's very helpful, Zach. So Yeah, I'll probably reach out after the presentation on that. But yeah, thank you for taking a minute to just chat about that.
Thanks, Patrick. That was a great question. There are lots of groups that are interested in getting their hands on these data. So I would anticipate there will be some kind of data sharing protocol worked out at some point in the future. I also do not yet know what that is, but stay tuned.
Okay, guys, if you don't mind, I will finish. I still have, I think, 2 slides, and we can answer any question after that. So if you recall, we were talking about discharge and how it's affect the surface area available for the spawning of lake sturgeon. So here on this graph, I just want to show you that with the integration response ecosystem response model, we have various hydrodynamic scenario. So we can produce a map for different combination of discharge at international falls and in the tributaries. And you can see when we, let's say, play with the number, how we can change the surface area available for lake sturgeon. So what's the conclusion? I will try to wrap up what we talked about the bathymetric survey, how we're going to use those data in the integrated modeling we do at ECCC, and how we can use it. So like I said at the beginning, so the integrated model is as good as the bathymetric survey is. So it's for us the first layer of information that we need, and the better it is, the better we can develop model useful to give a quantitative answer on the way we manage discharge for the spawning of lake sturgeon. But in the river, we also have a model for walleye. In Rainy Lake and Namakan Reservoir, we have 12 other models, and we can also use those data to develop models that are not necessarily linked to the environment, but also to economical impact. So our contract at ECCC with the IGC is to extend the model and to develop new ones for the entire Rainy River. So my hope is to extend the spawning habitat model for lake sturgeon from Manitou Rapid to Lake of the Wood when we have the new DEM. Part of our contract too is to migrate the RUIM system to a more friendly system. So it's called the IC system for integrated socio-economic and environmental system. We have to deliver that by March 2025. And the final goal with that is to analyze and validate the impact of the 2018 oil curve. So thank you, and merci beaucoup. We are now ready for questions.
Thank you so much, all of you, all 4 of you. That was great. There is a question in the chat from Karen Cedarwall as well. Has this study reached out to local Indigenous knowledge holders, local guides, local historians, or biologists that have knowledge of the river and fisheries to supplement your data analysis, especially in relation to historical info? Data may exist on sturgeon spawning ground success based on water levels. There was a past fisheries biologist, Val Masons, who was based out of Kenora. He had this info when he advocated for protection of spawning fish, but later biologists might also have those data. Marianne, do you want to talk about your data sets, where you got information?
Okay, so for the version you're seeing right now, no, we didn't talk with those people in 2015. Like I said, we had a contact with people at University of Waterloo and DFO. But since then, I don't know if you want to also add something about that, Tika. So my group in Quebec City met with Grand Council Treaty Tree and with the Adaptive Management Committee of the IGC, and we met with different knowledge holders. And Lake Sturgeon was one of the subjects we exchanged on, but for right now, we didn't exchange any data. We are starting building that relationship. So I don't know if you want to give more details about that project, Tika.
Sure, I can jump in and just add. So this is part of the ongoing scope of work for the Adaptive Management Committee to do that kind of outreach. Karen is a member of the Watershed Board and the Adaptive Management Committee, and she's also a Métis senator. So of interest. We are working toward trying to figure out how to do that kind of engagement in the best possible way with Indigenous knowledge holders, including Métis knowledge holders in the region. So that work is ongoing. And although Marianne and Olivier's time with the Adaptive Management Committee is limited, like it's in project pieces, we know the work is ongoing. So we will have to continually be doing analysis and data collection and refining the models and applying them over time. So I would anticipate that there will be plenty of opportunity for that kind of engagement coming up. Gail has a question. With the sand bed, are there any concerns that the bed dunes will shift and change over the year or years, requiring changes to the entire ecosystem response model? That was also my question. How do we accommodate shifting substrates in the river?
We do not. Up to if we have a monitoring of the bathymetry shift, we can include it. Or if we know if we have a kind of relationship of the moving bed, or we can use that, but for now we don't. But it's probably mostly on surface, but I would have to see the data too, but we'll see. It's a hard question to answer because it takes a lot of resources to map the floor and the river floor. So to include that, it could be an extensive work.
Zach, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I know we've talked about this, Olivier, and it was one of the things that we came up with was too, is from the modeling, there's gonna be certain areas of vulnerability or, higher rates of erosion that can happen, scour. And so this year when we surveyed, the water was higher, which generally means that there's probably more scour in certain areas and more deposition in others. So I think we talked about in the future doing some more spot surveys, not a full comprehensive one, but just in areas that are probably more vulnerable to see what the difference is.
It could help to establish a kind of relationship of the erosion deposition and do something in the model.
Yeah. So if we get more survey by time, we can use the hydrodynamic model to try to figure out how the bottom would change with different discharge.
Gail had a little follow-up there. What about with knowing the bed velocities calculated or measured?
What's the question?
Can you repeat that?
She was just asking, or like if you have the calculated or measured bed velocities, could you then use that to calculate shift in the substrate? And yes,
we have the shear velocity in the model, so we can use that as well as the new data sets to something a kind of model of bed shifting, or
like we did once with substrate with wave action. So we can link it.
I don't see any other questions in here, but I have a quick one for you, Marianne. How many performance indicators do we have for the Rainy River IERM IC system?
Okay,
so the Lake Sturgeon thing is one performance indicator, just for people who are watching.
In the river, as we speak, we have only two. So we have the Lake Sturgeon spawning habitat and larval drift, and we have walleye. And there's been exchanged to do one for vegetation. So listening to Zach, maybe since we don't have good bathymetric data in dense vegetation, it will be a challenge, but we can look at it. And meeting with different community, there's also an interest to do something for, sorry, my English, burial sites. So we'll look into it in the next year.
Great, thanks. Okay, I'll do one last call for questions. If there are any more, just put them in the chat, raise your hand, write it in the Q&A. What's CTU?
Cumulative, it's a cumulative degree, in English, it's cumulative degree day in English, I think. Sorry, I think I didn't translate it.
Okay, Tom has a question. Have bottom grab samples been taken to ground truth the bottom friction calculations?
That's one for you.
In the the bathymetry the campaign or field work.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Okay.
it's a Zach question.
Yeah,
Exact question, sorry.
A Zach and Jordan question. Yep.
Sure, and I think the USGS has taken samples. They've done side scan and actually taken soil samples. So when we pull all that data set together, that would be more of your ground truthing coming from that source. When we were out there, we did not pull sediment samples when we were on site, but the USGS has, so.
Yeah, there is a, pardon me, a parallel project that's happening that Anna Baker and colleagues are doing on the Rainy River, where she did transects and grab samples from the bottom. She's doing a sediment survey to measure nutrient sediment flows. Okay, I think we can wrap this one up. Thanks so much to all four of you. This was great, technical and very informative. And I'm looking forward to seeing all the process data and the magic that we can create with it in making new models and testing how our water levels and flows affect things downstream on the river. This was great.
Can't wait.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Merci. Ciao.
Bye.